Welcome along today. This is the third panel of the second Writers Guild of Great Britain Festival of Game Writing. Tonight, you'll know it's the Dialogue as Text, the Unspoken Secrets of Writing Interactive Dialogue. We've had that on the screen, just in case somebody's panicking and thought they turned up for a sort of lecture on DNA or something. We might cover that, put it in the questions. But we are here to talk about interactive dialogue as text. Tonight's panel has been organised and is hosted by the Writers Guild of Great Britain, which is a TUC affiliated union that represents writers working in TV, film, radio, theatre, animation, books, and musical theatre, and all sorts of other areas, including, of course, video games, which is why we are here tonight. What the Video Games Committee does is we look at offering advice, contract vetting, and we, of course, do events like this. We also publish the Writers Guild of Great Britain's video game guidelines, which cover all sorts of things you should be looking for in your contracts. And I'm happy to say that we'll be releasing an updated version of those in a few months' time. After talking about it for a while, after running the survey last year, they are going to come out this year, which I'm really excited about. My name's Andrew Walsh. I'm the co-chair of the Writers Guild of Great Britain Video Games Committee, along with Samantha Webb. I mention that because I'm also a freelance writer, and the Writers Guild is made up of a mixture of our full-time staff, you just met Kate, and also a set of volunteers, which means that if you join the Writers Guild, you not only get access to that the advice and contract vetting and other services, but you also have the opportunity to get involved. So should you wish to, once you become a member, you can join the Video Games Committee and decide on the types of things that we are doing and the initiatives that we run. So please do consider joining us so that we can help you and help other writers. We couldn't have made tonight happen without our sponsors at Artisy Software, who've also sponsored the other panels that we're having this week. There is still time, just about, to sign up for the remaining 2 panels that we have left this week, including tomorrow's Creating Narrative in Procedural Worlds, Writing Narrative with and for Procedural Generation, something I'm really looking forward to learning more about. And Artisy will be running a separate event following that one tomorrow. So we're running from 6 until 7:30 British standard summertime, and immediately following that, Artisy will be running a separate event on their Twitch channel, which will introduce people to the various aspects of their software, should you wish to go and attend that. Please note that chat's off, but you can send us polite questions, fun questions through the Q&A thing at the bottom of your screen, and we'll put those to the panelists if we get a chance in amongst everything. I think that's all of the information that I need to put across. So I shall say thank you very much for coming along, and I will pass you across to our chair for tonight, Leon, and you can introduce everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Andy. We are now live, and that's excellent. I'm very, very excited to have a wonderful panel joining us today. So hello to everybody who's watching us live, and also anyone who's watching us later on our YouTube channel. Very, very thrilled to be here and to see such lovely faces on the panel. I think what I will do is first introduce myself. I'm Leon. I'm a member of the Video Games Committee for the WGGB. And as I say, I'm joined by these fabulous folks. I think what I'm going to do is pass on to each of you to introduce yourselves, a little bit about you, what you've worked on, what time it is, because we have an incredibly international panel joining us today from various different time zones. So if you could also give us a shout out to where you are and what time it is, that would be fab. I'm going to start with Cara, and then let's go to Mohammed and then Ed.
Hello, my name is Cara Hillstock. I am a narrative designer, and I've worked for a few different games, primarily in the visual novel space, but currently I'm working on the games Onsen Master and Pride vs. Prejudice, a competitive multiplayer novel. It is 10 a.m. for me. I'm in Seattle, so thankfully it's a good time for me to be here.
Okay, so my name is Muhammad Fahmi, but you can just call me Fahmi because Indonesian don't really have the concept of first name and last name. So yeah, my last name is my nickname. I'm based in Jakarta, Indonesia, and it's midnight here right now. I work on, I always sleep like at 6 a.m., so it's fine. And I work on games like last year I released Coffee Talk and What Comes After. And I'm currently working on a project with fellow traveler called Project Heartbreak, the project title. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Ed Fear. I am lead creative at Mediatonic, which is a studio in London and also various other parts of the world. We're also now part of the Epic Games family. Most recently, I made a game called Murder by Numbers, which I co-wrote and directed, which came out last year. I've also worked on games like Hatoful Boyfriend a little bit, the Swords of Ditto, and many other very obscure games in the past.
Fabulous. Thank you all for those lovely introductions. Give us a bit of a sense of where you're at, what you've been working on, and I suppose we should just jump straight in. So we are. What are we doing? So game narrative is often discussed as interactive screenwriting, but every year millions of words of prose are published across the interactive industry. So I'm going to jump in with what's hopefully going to be a fairly spicy topic to start with and say, is interactive fiction just books with clicks? What do we think?
I mean, I think no. No, interactive fiction is not just books with clicks. And I mean, in the same way that, for example, reading a play is different from watching a play, I think that games and interactive fiction are a lot more than just the sum of their parts. There's a lot that, especially from the perspective of narrative design, which works not just on like writing the narrative, but also on integrating the narrative with every other aspect of a game. So art, direction, music, the gameplay itself, marketing sometimes as well. So all of that combines to create like an extremely like multidisciplinary and also just very complex way of how you have to integrate your writing with the work of others and with the work of this interactive game in order to create a certain kind of experience for the player. So I think no.
Ami or Ed want to jump in on that, or it's like we agree
Okay.
across the board?
I mean, I definitely agree with that. Although I should add that if you want to say books with clicks, right now it will be ebook. So interactive fiction is definitely not books with clicks. It's definitely way more than that, and it asks you to jump into the story instead of just like passively enjoying it. And the closest thing we can have compared to book is definitely choose your own storybook. And even then, with interactive fiction, we can expand it so much more than just click and read. It's way bigger than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just kind of echo what Kara and Mohammed have said. Like it can be like if you want to make your interactive fiction just be books with clicks, then go for it. Like that, that's absolutely fine. But the interactive fiction field is big, and there's all sorts of research and all these kind of crazy things going on that people are doing, and I think it's like a really fertile field. So it's kind of it's like there's so much possibility that you kind of have to in some ways choose like what you want to do. For Murder by Numbers, we decided that the story wasn't really going to be that interactive. Like the interactivity would come from the gameplay that was around it, and we wanted to be fairly linear with the story. We wanted to give the player some dialogue choices, sometimes for flavor, to let them give an extra choose the personality of the main character a little bit more. I mean, obviously the personality was defined, but they could tweak it to be a little bit sarcastic or a little bit this way or whatever. But that was just a decision we made because we wanted to tell a linear story, and we figured that that was just kind of where we were at that point. But there's endless possibilities really that are only limited by your imagination, and the tools we have nowadays to make these things allow you to go as crazily interactive as you want and have millions of branches. I mean, you may end up going mad with the complexity, but the possibility is definitely there.
Thank you.
I think I want to add something from what Ed said. So I think the whole world kind of left out compared to what the Japanese developers already did, because I saw a pretty interesting thread a few days ago about how in the West every game that requires you to read are visual novels, but in Japan you have adventure games, which are games like Phoenix Wright and Layton, and then visual novels are just novels with visuals. And then there are some other genres called kinetic novels, which is like visual novels but linear. So they have it. It's just like we focus so much on roguelikes and roguelites while just putting every reading games as visual novel, which is I think a bit of sad thing to happen.
And to add on to that, even within the visual novel space itself, there's a lot of room for interactivity. Like there are games that primarily rely on stats or relationship building or the branching pathways. There's games that have mini games that you have to pass in order to engage with other aspects of the narrative. So in the West, we very definitely do see visual novels as just books and like nothing else beyond that. And I think that that's really unfortunate, because I wish that more writers who don't really see themselves as games writers would take an interest in visual novels and in kind of trying just experimenting with like, what can I conceive of how I want to tell this story? What is a different way that I can tell this other than just using the words or the visuals of a visual novel to communicate it? And that obfuscation of people thinking that visual novels are basically just books and not games and not fun, I think holds a lot of people back from that. So you're right, that's totally a thing.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting like experimentation going on in that field of people trying to mix visual novels with other things. Like, you know, Murder by Numbers was a visual novel mixed with a Picross game, and you know there are a couple of other people doing that as well. And then there's like, you know, Persona is like a visual novel mixed with an RPG, and you know there's like so many possible combinations, and you know like I think it's like such a fertile space that yeah, it definitely does get a bit of a rap of like, well, okay, there's going to be a lot of reading, and it's going to be two static characters in a text box, and it's like actually there is like a large amount of expression within the field, but unfortunately that can be the perception from outside.
And a lot of the gameplay mechanics from visual novels have ended up in a lot of like really big Western games, like relationship building, and Fire Emblem Three Houses is one, but even in games like Mass Effect and Fallout, you can see similar patterns that visual novels have of how the stories are structured and how that all works. It's just a matter of how much emphasis you put on the story compared to how much emphasis you put on other aspects of the gameplay.
No, definitely. And I admit that was a bit of a cheeky sort of first question just to throw at you, because I think we are aware that there can be a perception that very kind of narrative heavy games are like, oh yes, and now we read a very digital novel that might have some beautiful graphics to go with it, but it is ultimately a book, but you click it. So I think that kind of insight that actually there is far more to it than that perception is, you know, really insightful and very, very helpful. Thank you for the and for just that kind of bouncing off and the interesting kind of intersection of cultural dynamics that come into how we produce content and how stories are shared and how we differently focus on different parts of stories, like relationships, like, you know, themes and other bits and pieces. So I think that's set us up quite nicely for this kind of discussion in general. And I think the other kind of moving slightly from this question of like, are they just books with clicks, to perhaps a spin on that question of, you know, someone who is interested in interactive fiction but has experience elsewhere, say, you know, as a novelist or in script writing or such like, you know, can they transfer their skills into games? You know, are there skills that they should look into honing before they move into games, or should they just go, I already know it, like, here I am, like, let me show you how it's done. I got this. You know, what are your thoughts?
Well, obviously, it's very dangerous to think, I got it, I know everything. Because if there's one thing I've learned from 10 years of, well, more than 10 years of making games, is that I literally never stop learning at all. Um, I think it's really up to you to define the parameters of what you want to make and play to your strengths. You know, like if you wanted to make like a visual novel that is just people talking because you have experience of writing a lot of dialogue, then that's absolutely something you can do, and you may have to work out how you can do that story without without other stuff happening. But like, for example, in Murder by Numbers, we did something that some visual novels do, which is where we have, we could move the character portraits, we could kind of flip them. And so in some ways it became almost a bit like a stage play, because you'd be saying this character comes in on the right and then they move over to here and then they turn around and then they look annoyed and then they go off. So actually the process of writing it was a bit more like writing a play. And like, we would be thinking about what is the staging of this scene going to be like. It wasn't just what are they saying to each other. So if you have that, then you can be like, oh cool, I want to incorporate those kind of elements into it. If you have a prose background, then you can write a game that maybe takes place, maybe a lot of the text is like first person, where you're kind of exploring someone's feelings, or you can take more time to explain scenes in text. Or so I think it's entirely up to the writer to kind of, all of these possibilities exist. So just work on what skills you have already and kind of jump into it from there.
Okay. Actually, that question is one of the reasons why I'm pretty worried about Elden Ring, because George R. Martin is involved in that game, and will the game be something like Dark Souls but Game of Thrones? We don't know, because the skill set requires are very, very different. Just how one of my favorite writer, Neil Gaiman, made a game, and that game is a great game, but it still doesn't shine as bright as his other works. So it definitely requires you to learn other things. I would suggest that if anyone with like traditional writing backgrounds want to start making games, start experimenting with something small, maybe something with RPG Maker or Twine, and or start with a simple genre without gameplay. That would be a good way to know how does it feel to make a game, I guess. And by the way, I wanted to answer one of the open question. So the example I mentioned wasn't Phoenix Rising. It was Phoenix Wright, the Ace Attorney series, Gyakuten Saiban. Yeah, that one.
Jumping off of that, I think for me, the way that I try to explain it to new writers is basically all different kinds of writing kind of require you to focus more on a specific skill of writing. Like if you're writing plays, you have to focus a lot more on dialogue. If you're writing novels, you tend to have to focus a lot more on description. And I think that that's one of the dangers that I see when people think that their writing skills can directly translate into games, is that they forget that there's that process of fine tuning which aspects you need to focus on. And there is no blanket statement for what you're going to have to focus on, because every game is different and the objectives of every game are going to be different. So it really does, as Ed was saying, it really does depend on what you're wanting to create, and like really honing in on that vision and then trying to experiment with your skills and tweak these different skill sets up and down in order to see what actually suits what you're trying to accomplish. That being said, I really feel like there is a huge space in games right now for people who have writing experience in other fields to come in and bring a lot of that those skills in that context to games, because we see a lot of, or at least I've seen a lot of games writers kind of coming more directly from fan fiction and other things like that, rather than coming from a more diverse skill set of like playwriting, script writing, screenwriting, poetry, short stories. There's a lot of different kind of skills that you can really focus on excelling in that then would be very useful to bring towards games. So I do definitely agree with Mohammed about start with something small. Like figure out what you want to make and start with something small so that you can get a feel for whether you like it, whether it's enjoyable to you, and if you want to change something up because you realize it's not working, it's not going to be totally devastating.
One thing I just remembered actually is that about there certainly used to be, I think, a perception from writers in other media that getting into games would be a very easy or very quick like thing to do. I remember at, funny enough, the Writers Guild of Great Britain Awards about 10 years ago, I presented the Games Award and a very prominent writer came up to me afterwards. I won't name drop, but, well, he would embarrass them. But he said to me, so I hear I could make some money doing games, like who do I talk to? And it was just very much a like, oh, like, no, this isn't something you can just like jump into, just be like, oh, you know, I've got a free couple of months, then maybe I'll just work on a game or whatever. And there certainly was, like I say, about 10 years ago, there was like a trend of studios hiring like big name writers from other fields, and then it just never really worked because games are so unique and like you have to work as a team so much, and you can't just like, it's not like, you know, writing a script where you do that up front and then everyone, you know, works on that. It's you're writing a script in reaction to what everyone else is doing and all of that kind of stuff. And I think luckily as time has gone on, like that's definitely diminished, and I think people have realized that it is kind of you can't do it without knowing about games. Like if you don't know games, if you don't love games, then it will be quite evident in like the work you produce. And also, like, I don't like writing games is hard, and in some ways, like, I don't know why you'd want to do that if you weren't like invested in it. Like, it's probably more cultural cachet in being a screenwriter, right? So like, you know, go do that. Don't come and be at the bottom of the barrel with us.
Ed's just saying it how it is. Like, oh, like you're just cutting everyone's soul, Ed. I'd almost say that that's mean, but you know, I mean, but I think it's sort of interesting what you're saying. Something kind of in the last decade or so that pings in my mind sounds a little bit like there was a perception perhaps several years ago that, oh, I've written some novels, or I've written some TV shows or pilots or whatever, and I've done a bit of a jump to comics maybe. Games can't be that much different. You know, do you think there's sort of, if there was a kind of closer cousin, do you think it would be comics? Or I'm aware that games is a very eclectic, let's call it tentacle monster of storytelling and gameplay. But did you think that might play a part in it?
I think the closer example would be writing for museums, like, you know, describing and designing which paintings, which artwork need to be put in the museum is the closest thing I could think of with video games, at least for the bigger triple space or in the certain genre. But yeah, a museum or theatrical performance, I guess.
Definitely very fair. Just as a quick reminder, because we are taking you know, questions as we go, so if anyone from the audience has general questions, you know, feel free to stick them in the Q&A, or you can hit us up on Twitter at WGGB. You can, and we're watching the live tweets there, so we can pick up your questions as we go along. Let's excuse me. So some additional questions we kind of got that a bit more kind of focused on dialogue specifically. So, you know, let me see which one. How do you overcome not being able to add tone or descriptions to, or emotion via a voice actor? So if you're writing description, how do you convey tone of dialogue? This is a nice easy one for you. Like, but how do you kind of indicate indicate what you want to be said through your dialogue if you don't have a voice actor that's going to be putting those intonations to the text?
So I think that there's a few different ways that you can do that. But I would say that the two primary ways are, one, like focusing on the dialogue itself, making sure that the dialogue, if it's meant to sound sad, it's lethargic dialogue. People are speaking slowly, they're not using that many words. If they're angry, maybe their character who uses a lot of words and they use really harsh sounding words, obviously that kind of thing. But then there's the aspect of games where, again, especially from a narrative designing perspective, if you have a particularly tense scene, you want to make sure that the music is reflecting that. You want to make sure that the art that's on the screen is reflecting that. You want to make sure that if a game has a UI, like the graphical interface for how you navigate through menus, that should work in with the tone of the overall game, or the theme of what you're trying to communicate, or the setting. All of that kind of needs to work together in order to make sure that what the writer is writing for the game is really being pushed through. Because no matter how good of a writer you are, if you're trying to write a really angry scene but the music in the background is nice and happy, it's not really going to read well.
Definitely what Kara said is like really, really good advice. It's really about how you set up that character, right? You have to implant this kind of idea of them in the player's mind, so that when they read the dialogue, they try to approximate kind of the voice that you were going for when you were thinking about writing it. And that is really tough. And part of that is you do it through the other elements in the game, the character art and how they're standing, and how their facial expressions and all of that kind of stuff, and like I said, the music, like all of those kind of things, you tend to lean on those a bit more. But specifically in terms of the dialogue, like it can be really tough, and sometimes you also have to realize whether you're going for something that's like too specific and that people maybe aren't going to get. Like we had a thing in Murder by Numbers where we had a character that I wanted to be very much like Jonathan Van Ness from Queer Eye, and kind of like one of the things that I love about them is they have this way of talking where they kind of tell a story. They're like, oh my God, your eyes are so beautiful. They hold me and they cuddle me and they tell me everything's going to be okay and that we're going to get married and we're going to be happily ever after. And I was like, oh, I love that style of talking. Like it's really unique. And so I tried to write a character with that. And then I realized as I was playing the game and editing it that unless you knew specifically who I was talking about, it just sounded like it was unbelievably overwritten. And like one of the really hard decisions I had to make was just like, you know what, I absolutely can't guarantee that people are going to know who I'm referencing and who I'm in, like, because I can't say it in a way that makes it obvious. So I'm actually just going to have to like cut a lot of this, and it was like it was kind of a painful thing to do, but that's what you have to be aware of when you're just working with text, is like, am I being a little bit too specific in what I'm expecting? You have to kind of try and read it from the perspective of somebody who doesn't have the references in your head that you have, and sometimes leaning on other people can be really great for that. If you're part of a team, like getting other people to read it and kind of be like, did you get what we were going for there, or is it just not coming across, and do we need to work it out again,
So yeah, I think collaboration with your team is very important here, because video games is a collaborative project. Writers is not the only person involved in the making of video games. There are the artists, programmers, and composers. You should work with them. As a writer, you don't only write for the players, but you write for the team, so they can understand the stories better, and they can use what they have, their skills, to help you convey the story, convey the intonation, even without voice acting. Like, for example, in Coffee Talk, one of my favorite scenes in Coffee Talk is there's this one debate between a vampire and a succubus with a human in the middle of them. And I proposed that we made something like a comic panel, and then the programmer like, hey, I made the comic panel can change size when they talk, so it feels more intense. And then we have a bug where the character in the middle just like starts getting smaller, smaller, and smaller. And we left that bug because it conveys the story better. It conveys the emotion of the characters better. And it happens because it's a collaboration between the writers and the programmer and the artists who draw the facial expression and such. So go ask help from your team. It's very, very important when you're making a game anyway. So yeah.
Probably, I suppose we can pick that a little bit. So from that, what are some of your tips for writing unique and identifiable characters with really distinct voices? Like I know, Ed, you kind of touched on the inspiration you had from Queer Eye, but sort of if you don't have that incredibly like very distinct voice, because he does have a very distinct voice, how, what are your tips for creating unique character voices?
I wish I knew. If I did, I think I'd be a lot richer than I am. To be perfectly, I mean, it's the eternal question, right? It's like, how do you create interesting characters and how do you give them interesting voices? And I think part of it, the part I would say is just like really taking some time to think what characteristics of that character inform the way they talk, like what subcultures are they part of, what is their, what social class did they grow up in, what kind of education did they have. And if you kind of sit and think of all of these questions, you'll start to realize, okay, this person is quite wordy, this person is quite short, this person is, also it's emotions, like if they are quick to anger, then they will be very abrupt. So it's really about taking the time to kind of sit with your character, this idea of the character you have in your head, and just kind of think what is it about them that would influence the way they talk, where are they from, what's their accent, all of this kind of stuff. And then when you're sitting there writing it, that voice will be in your head, and those words that express their character will kind of come up. But also you probably will have to also tweak them afterwards, to make things a bit more characterful from your first draft or whatever. But yeah, that would be my advice, I think.
One of the things that I like to do, especially since with games, you're usually collaborating with other writers or just other creatives. And so sometimes you need to have some kind of like standard form that you can like send out to people, like, this is how this character talks. And so I try to break it down on a really granular level of like, this person really focuses on verb usage. Like verbs are really important to them, and their dialogue is really short. They tend to talk in short sentences. They tend to be like more clipped, whereas this person is extremely verbose. They like to describe things. They love hyperbole. Breaking it down on that kind of granular level so that you can hand that to other writers and everybody can kind of get a similar feel for not only who the character is, but like how their voice should sound, and like having those sessions to really like iron that out with the other writers so that everybody has a similar voice going in their head. That would be my advice.
So this is actually a problem I met during the development of Coffee Talk, because in the early build, one of the feedback I got was all of the 11 characters sounds like me, which is not a good thing. So what we did was we made a role play session. So I know some of the characters, like, okay, my programmer, he's like this one character. So I invited him to the meeting room, and then the other member, like my boss, okay, he's this character, and I just gave them, hey guys, so this is the topic that this scene we will talk about this topic. So just sorry, my cat mute the mic. So just chat, and I will record everything, and I transcribe our discussion and edit it uh, accordingly, and it works. The character doesn't sound like me anymore. I mean, one of the characters still sound like me, but at least it helps a lot. And one other thing that I did was using horoscope. Like people love astrology, so use the I would use the stereotypes from each horoscope, each astrology, its stars, it's whatever it is, and define your character based on that. So people can understand, people can relate with that, and it's a good method to help you writing the characters, I guess. Yeah. And sorry about the cat.
Why would you apologize for the cat? I mean, I think cat, like the cat currently. What is the cat's name? We must know so we can.
She's Tina, by the way.
Tina. Fabulous. And I suppose, additionally, sort of, I think that example of like you kind of playing out the kind of dialogue, I think is such a great tip. Like that's so good, because I think one of the other questions that I've seen a bit is how, not just about writing a distinct voice, but how do you distinct voices between several characters? How do you make sure they don't sort of blur into each other? Have you had experiences when you've been writing characters and gone, and what did you do to correct that when it did come on?
For me, whenever I have a situation where two characters are talking and they both sound like each other, it's definitely happening because like I, as the writer, like have something I am wanting to communicate through the scene, and I have forgotten to keep hold of like who these characters are and where they're coming from and why they're really saying the things that they're saying. So my antidote for that is to go back through the scene and really focus on the perspective of each individual character and rework their dialogue so that I'm sure that I'm actually speaking from their perspective and not just saying the things that I want to say because I was very excited when I was writing the scene the first time around.
So a lot of the stuff I tend to do, I have done over the years, has largely been like ensemble work where you kind of have like 8 or however many like quite prominent characters or whatever. And one of the things that I like to do early on is I kind of create like this is kind of a hackneyed thing to do, so I do apologize up front, but I kind of create a set of scales of things like personality scales. So like on one end you have introverted, on the other hand you have extroverted, and I'll do like 5 of those that are like, are they open to new experiences, are they closed and set in their ways or whatever. And I do about 5 of these, and then I plot every character on all of those scales, and I make sure that everyone is, that like every part of this, that nobody is overlapping on too many areas. And if they are, then you kind of go, okay, well I need to change, like, because if you're doing something with an ensemble piece, like you want any dialogue between them to be snappy, and to, you want them to have different points of view, because there's nothing, there's nothing more boring than listening to 2 people who agree talk about something. Like you want people who disagree, or they, maybe not fundamentally, but just on a small level or whatever, and that's where the drama and the conflict comes from. So I always use that to make sure that everyone, and I also sometimes on the, if the project has like themes, like about I don't know, this was something I had from Mary Demal, who worked on Deus Ex, some of the latest Deus Ex games, but she was like, we have themes of transhumanism in the game, so we work out a couple of scales, like what do they think about this, and we make sure that everyone is on different parts of the scale, because that means that when they come together they will inherently bounce off each other, and that's what we want to capture in any scene, as people coming up against each other.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one way to do it is relying on generic skills like MBTI or horoscope again. And one of the cheat I use is I asked different person to edit writings. So basically, because English is not my first language, I need to have an editor to help me with the grammars and the wordings and stuff. And I usually ask, hey, my friend, hey, can you just edit this character? And then the other friends will edit another characters, or just hire different editor to edit each character differently. So at least even if they sound similar, the editor will put their voice in that character. It's not the best way to do it, but it's kind of like cheating your way into it. So I guess that's one way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely did that, and it kind of touches on a question that someone else had about when you've got multiple writers and how you manage to keep the vision of them consistent. And one good way of doing that is give ownership of certain characters to certain people, you know, maybe the person that came up with it or the person that gets it the most, and then they're the one that has the final say on any of the dialogue, you know, on the very final form of what line it is. You know, someone else can write it and they can write the scene, and then just that person can go along and tweak it. They go, okay, I think they'd say it this way or whatever. And it's kind of making part of, you know, any part of writing as part of a team is like losing that sense of, if I didn't write it, I didn't do it. Like, you have to kind of let go of that and let other people kind of, you know, tweak what you've done and kind of polish it in different ways and still feel that you have ownership of that scene or whatever, you know.
And so that kind of process of sort of letting go and sort of giving over to somebody else to have like their particular ownership over stuff, on a sort of more at the flip side of that, what happens when you can't let go so well? Like, what happens, or when things start to go a little bit more awry? How do you start to bring those back together? Can you bring it back together? What are some of the when it's a trickier team to work with? How do you find ways to keep the dialogue consistent for the game when some people might be taking the character voice in different directions than you might intend or was originally intended? That's a tricky kind of question, I realize. A bit of a curveball.
Well, I guess that's the whole point of giving ownership to someone, is you're essentially saying, look, you do have the final say here. And a lot of any team, doesn't, not even just writing, game development, even outside of game development, is you have to have somebody who has the final say. And it doesn't have to be necessarily the most senior person. It's about giving different people different responsibilities, and then, you know, you just kind of have to trust in that. And certainly that was, you know, when I was the first time being a game director, learning how to let go of certain things and give ownership of certain things was like, it's not an easy thing. And you never think you're doing it right, because you're like, am I being too nice? Am I letting them get, you know? It's like there's no good answer to it. It's like every person just tries to muddle their way through it the best, I think.
I think that's very fair. So we've had an observation generally that it seems like a lot of the sorts of games that tend to lean towards more sort of dialogue heavy or sort of character driven stuff tend to be things like, you know, lore based or school settings or these kinds of heavily interactive sort of spaces, or you know, dating or group, you know, sort of situations. Do you think that, you know, these, you know, why do you think these particular genres do crop up so often in this type of games development?
I think it's more of a marketing thing. I think that because other games in those settings have sold really well before, people, because with these different types of games, like these dating games or the law based games, there's a different expectation of gameplay that tends to accompany those settings. So like dating games, you assume that's a dating sim and that the relationship building is a large part of that, whereas law games tend to, or they can vary a lot, but there's generally an element of mystery. There's generally puzzles in those kinds of games, generally a stronger narrative. And so I think that part of the reason we're seeing these things consistently over and over again is because publishers and companies feel like these are safer bets for narrative-driven games because we know that people will buy them. And it's a lot harder trying to pitch games that don't fit those boxes, or maybe have things that some publishers might consider unmarketable, like prominent queer characters and things like that. It's a lot harder to push those to the forefront just because of how the expectations for the market are. So that's why I think those are like the primary genres we see.
So I agree with Kara. One more thing to add to, because the whole industry was built like that, right now we see the trend of people that grew up with those kind of games wanting to make their version of those kind of games. Like, hey, I played this game when I was in high school. I think I could make some improvement in this game. I could put my voice in this same genre. It's my tribute to my favorite game. That I think that happens quite a lot too, I guess, yeah.
I'm just scrolling through questions as we go. So we've gotten loads and loads and loads, and just trying to pick out some that are sort of to cover several at the same time. So one question, when you are coming to write dialogue for a character, do you do an in-depth character background before you even begin writing them? How do you figure out as you go along? Have you got some particular examples that really stand out in terms of this character was just sailing straight onto the page, like they couldn't get them to shut up, it was keeping me up all night, driving me around the bend? Or did you have to sit down and do a lot of research, a lot of background, sort of getting to know them first before you could even begin to write stuff? How you found those experiences?
So I think giving them background is a very wise move, because honestly, what I did when I was writing Coffee Talk is just like made a very generic and general background of the characters, and that didn't help anyone in the team, including myself. And we even had to rewrite some plot because the whole team just doesn't understand the character. Even the writer himself doesn't understand the character enough. So having a good background, a good lore, that even if the players will never see them, would be a very wise choice to do, I think. Yeah.
At the same time, kind of contradicting that, there are types of games where you don't really want to give that much, or at least defined background knowledge to a character, because they're meant to be someone that the character helps to create. Or like in a lot of roguelike games, you get to create your entire party and you get to give them certain traits. So you can do things like tying personality types to gameplay mechanics, so that if you're playing Death Road to Canada and you've got a character who has like the doctor trait, then they're going to have dialogue related to being a doctor. There's a way that you can get around things like that. But there's also times when you're writing for the main character of like a Skyrim or a Mass Effect, or even Link from The Legend of Zelda, where all of Link's characterization comes more from the sounds that he makes and how he moves his physical body, and sometimes expressions that he makes, and not actually really that much to do with his background or who he is. So it depends on the kind of game that you're writing. And I would agree, if you're writing a narrative focused game, then absolutely please give your characters backgrounds. That's very important. But otherwise, sometimes you need to work with more of an impression of who the character feels like, so that everything else the player can create for themselves.
Yeah, I would say I don't think if you're writing something that's a bit more traditional, a bit more linear, it's not really that much different from writing a book or a screenplay or whatever. Like everyone has their own different way of working. Like, personally, I like to spend a bit of time defining them, and then but I kind of figured that it's easy to go overboard up front and get really into the weeds and really like do that, and then you're not actually experiencing the character. And I feel like I like to kind of build up an idea of them, right? Like an outline that's not specific massively, but gives the flavor of who the character is. And then I just like to try writing them in different scenes, try writing them with characters that we already have, even if that character and those two characters will never actually have a scene together. But like, how would they bounce off each other, and like what makes them interesting in this exchange? And then kind of because I always find that I personally I find it very hard to get a strong sense of a character at the beginning, but as I'm writing them, I suddenly realize things about them that are like really important about them, and then I will kind of go back and change the original thing that the original overview document or whatever, and kind of build it that way, kind of try and be a bit iterative about it. But sometimes you don't have that time, sometimes you don't have that luxury, and you just like, especially in games where the artists might be wanting a bio of the character to draw and you've not actually written any of their dialogue yet, so you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is them. And then like that's definitely happened to me a number of times where I've kind of said, oh, this is the character, and then I've actually come to write them and I've been like, oh no, I don't want to write that character at all. Like they've totally changed in my head, and you kind of have to mix the two, mash the two together. But that's game development. Game development is a runaway train that you're building the track for as it's going, which is one of the unique things about games. It's not like a film or a book where you're writing things up front. Well, not a book, because the book is the thing, but like you're not doing it and then making it. You're doing it as everyone else is also doing their stuff. And so yeah, sometimes you just kind of have to go, oh well, I made that decision earlier, we got to go with that. Or you go, I want to work out a way that I can kind of, I've got this character who looks a bit like this, but I'm gonna maybe I'll try and maybe this is a chance to do something that people wouldn't expect with the character. If you have a character that's this way, and will change the it's game development. Like I say, game development is about reacting to change a lot of the time, and sometimes that changes from within as well as without.
I think that's all very valuable, and really that's games for you. And now I'd have that spectacular image of the cartoon, like we kind of put the train tracks down as the train is running along. That's so games. I hadn't thought about it like that before, and now I will never be able to unsee it. Thanks, Ed. Sort of jumping from that slightly, would you say the same sorts of things apply if you're writing a character whose culture or sexuality or gender isn't yours? Like, how do you approach something like that compared to just, oh, I don't know what this character is yet? How important is that additional stuff?
So, okay.
No, you can. Okay, I'll go. One of the things that I think is interesting about this question, as it's usually asked, so I'm like a person of color, and I'm queer, and I'm chronically ill, so I like have a lot of intersections across the spectrum of differing identities. But it always interests me that the question is put as like, if you're a straight person writing a gay person, or if you're more of the dominant culture writing a non-dominant identity, how do you do that? Rather than the opposite of, if you are gay, how do you write a straight person? Which people tend to struggle less with, because the dominant like ideas and narrative in our cultures are about those primary those primary identities. And so I think that the best advice is to, if you can't find somebody who already is part of those identities to take ownership of the characters that you're talking about, if you can't like find a queer person to write a queer person, then the next best thing would be to do as much research as possible and interact with people who are from that identity that you're hoping to write about, and really immerse yourself in that for a long time. Like, I think people who are of those identities are going to be able to know when it's not an own voices context. And it's really important to just do your best to spend a lot of time researching and immersing yourself in that space. And I think that will help a lot. Additionally, there are sensitivity readers, and especially in the like indie game space, there's a lot of people who are out there specifically to help with avoiding maybe some of the pitfalls in writing that you might know about simply because you're not familiar with, or you're not of that identity. So both of those things would highly recommend.
Kara has answered everything, so yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, Cara has absolutely nailed it there. I think one of the things that I have worried about recently, because I'm such a chronic worrier, is like also like the weight of giving somebody that somebody of a marginalized group the ownership of that character or whatever, and expecting them to be able to 100% it, and essentially like washing your hands of it because you're like, oh well, you know, we've given it to this person, so you know it's up to them to flag whenever there are any issues, because you know there are multiple power dynamics in play. If you give that ownership to a junior person, they may not feel able to bring it up to when senior people are talking. And also, no one person of any group can 100% represent that group. Like when I was writing KC, you know, our gay character, I was petrified because, you know, I was like, I'm a gay man, and if I get this wrong, does it mean like I can't do anything? Like this is the one thing I should be able to write. And then I kind of realized that actually I had this weight of expectation on me, and that I was making myself worry that I had to deliver a perfect character when that wasn't. The character I was creating could never encapsulate 100% of the, you know, gay male experience. So there will be some people who don't see the representation they want to see in that, and kind of owning that is okay. But I just feel like I worry about, especially in situations where people maybe don't get this because they're not members of a marginalized community. They feel that they can just give ownership and that they're doing the good thing by doing that, but they also need to like make sure that person doesn't feel unduly like burdened by it. And obviously the idea would have to have more than one person of any marginalized group in your team, and you know that's a dream we can work towards, that I think would be wonderful. But until that happens, like just being like really aware of like not just handing it off and thinking that they can just handle all of it, because it's, you know, because the situation for representation is still so generally poor. Like it's definitely getting better, that I think everybody wants the characters they see, they go like, oh my god, there's a queer character, like this is going to be amazing, I'm going to see myself, and then they don't see 100% of themselves in it, and then they go, oh no, I'm so disappointed. And like hopefully what will happen eventually is that there are so many like queer or you know BIPOC characters that they you know that they don't expect that 100% representation with characters. But until then we need to like be a bit careful and sorry, I've kind of ranted. This is a soapbox I think about an awful lot, but yeah, like it's not something you can just like hand off responsibility for. It's like everyone, even if you're not part of that community, you still have like a part to play in kind of making that representation good, I think. I'm gonna shut that.
Thank you so much for bringing it up. That was excellent.
By the way, I like to add one thing. So it actually happened to me the other way around during the development of Coffee Talk, because I'm an Asian and writing a game that is set in Seattle, which I never visited in my whole life. And the funny thing is, one thing that helped me was if I could diversify my team, then I can diversify the people who playtest the game. You can get feedbacks from various backgrounds. And thanks to that feedback, I realized late in the development that I actually put Asian culture, too much Asian culture in a game that is set in the United States. And that made everything feels weird. So yeah, in the end, we managed to save that plot to make it more believable. I guess if you cannot expand your team, expand the people that plays your game before it's out. Yeah.
I think this is a particularly fascinating kind of very topical discussion point. I think there's a lot of nerves around writing particular types of characters and the fear of getting it wrong, like the fear of letting the team down. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure, and the bravery I think it sometimes takes to put those characters and those stories out there, I think kind of gets underappreciated at this particular moment of like, well, it should be what I want in the way I want it for this particular mood that I'm in, and when it's not just disappointment. I think sometimes it's anger, and that's quite intimidating, I think, for writers, for game devs, for all kinds of folks. I think this is a really fantastic kind of point to raise, even if it is a bit of a rant, but a good rant, and a rant I think is quite topical. If we kind of pull it back maybe a little bit from the fire of this, and we'll bring it right back down, like right back down. So what are some tips for improving dialogue writing skills if you're struggling to make conversations sound more natural? If everything sounds very robotic, if it's not a robot character, how do you go about making it sound more human or flowing better? What are your tips?
I mean, the classic one that everyone says is like, just listen to people, isn't it? Like that's the one you always get in all of the writing books. But it is true. It's about listening to as many different voices as you can. Sometimes the best way to do that is sitting in a coffee shop and just earwigging on what's going on, which is quite a lot of fun. Or like being on a bus and like and overhearing things or whatever. Like that's it's cliche advice, but it really works. And it's also in terms of like what content you consume, like making sure that you try to as a person like consume a wide range of content from a wide range of people, and then you will naturally hear different voices and different communities, and you'll come to kind of understand how people talk in a certain way. Obviously it's difficult, especially these days with how like overproduced and fake a lot of things are, like on YouTube and Instagram and stuff like that, that like it's not actually that authentic or whatever. But I think there definitely are resources like that. If you can't, if you can't get out, then you can, just listen to people talking and doing vlogs and things like that. Like you will pick up natural ways of talking from that.
One of the challenges for writing for games specifically is that a lot of the time you are tasked with providing kind of tutorial or other technical information to the player through dialogue. And when that happens, it is extremely difficult to make that dialogue sound like any kind of thing that a human would say. And sometimes that can unfortunately have like impacts for how players perceive that character moving forward. That being said, in those kinds of situations, I've always leaned more towards making sure that the technical information is clearly communicated, because it's far more important that your players know how to play the game than it is that they are 100% getting the dialogue, how to play the game through an in-universe mechanism, especially if being in universe is somewhat confusing about like where you need to go and what you need to do next. The other suggestion that is a very time-intensive suggestion that I have, but one that has helped me a lot, is to learn foreign languages. Because a lot of the times you can't really understand how many options you have in constructing the English language until you've understood how other cultures do it and how other people construct language, and that can open up a lot of opportunities and just kind of areas for development that you might not have noticed before.
that learning the foreign language thing is a genius idea. I have to learn more language, I guess. Anyway, in my case, I usually prefer to cheat my way out of the problem. So instead of learning how to make the characters feels natural, I limit myself to work on characters that I can write. Uh, I'm sure that okay, I can. That's why most of my characters are either hipsters or nerds because that's how I said I understand. I understand how to write those characters. And along the way, as I write more games, I would be able to learn more things about making characters sound natural. It's a long process, but I think it's the safest bet, at least for me. I love to cheat my way out of everything, I guess.
Yeah, that's what we call working smart, not hard. Just you playing to what you know and not giving yourself such a headache on certain things. But when it comes to things like dialogue challenges, what do you think are some of the most challenging things to produce through dialogue? I'm seeing various questions to do like, how do you write funny things? How do you write witty characters, for example? That very nebulous question of how do you write funny seems like one of the massive kind of challenge areas. What do you think are some real difficult areas of dialogue that just make you go, oh no, they want me to write that?
I cry. I mean, just in general. No, whenever people say we want witty and funny dialogue, it is so hard when you don't have someone performing comedy. It is unbelievably hard because what you come to realize is that a lot of comedy is in timing, and you then have to work out how can we do that. And sometimes you have some control over timing, so in the way that the text plays out. So for example, you may be able to put a little pause in between two dialogue boxes which lets a punchline land a little bit better or whatever. Or one of the things I often find having to do is that sometimes I'd have a funny line that kind of where almost like the setup and the punchline were in the same dialogue box, and you're like, oh, that doesn't work. We need to make sure we cut this dialogue box, and then even though that means we'll have another dialogue box that's really short just afterwards, that gap of the player pressing a button puts in the pause that allows the joke to land or whatever. So yeah, you just kind of have to work with the very limited tools that you have. But yes, it is incredibly hard, and when anybody makes a game that is text-based and funny, I hope you realize how incredible that achievement is, because I certainly can't do it. I've been trying for years and I'm still not there. Like, I get better at it, but it's magic. It really is.
So yeah, I think comedy is the hardest thing to write. Is like among any other genres, comedy is the most, I guess, the most cultural thing, because you can watch any TV shows from any regions. You watch a comedy show from Japan, and people from the West might understand what's happening, because it's even I live in Indonesia and I never understand the jokes that the people in the Eastern Indonesia do, and the people from there doesn't understand what the people from the Western Indonesia do. So I guess one thing that you can do is you cannot please everyone. So choose your style of comedy. Choose something you're comfortable with or you're familiar with your culture, and focus on that. Or if you have multiple characters, put like each of them have different style of comedy. It's not a safe bet, but it's worth a try.
I guess I'm the odd person out here because I actually really like writing comedy and humorous dialogue. And part of that is because, like, if you haven't been able to tell, I favor a more like multidisciplinary approach to my writing. And in the past, I did a lot of like acting and improv work, and I studied comedy for a little while. And so that would be my suggestion, especially the book Truth in Comedy is a really, really good recommendation because it kind of boils down to the core fundamentals of how, like, why humor is a cultural force that like all humans appreciate. Yeah, so if you're the kind of person who is open to that, I would suggest like signing up for improv, watching a lot of comedy specials, just kind of immersing yourself in that as much as possible, because that's going to help you get the kind of intuitive sense of timing that you're going to need in order to make jokes happen. And then also, when you're working, if you don't, generally speaking, people will allow you to do this, but if they don't, really fight for the ability to play the game with your writing in it and seeing it show up so that you can tailor the writing to how it appears in the game, because you will never actually know how your writing comes off until you see it in the game. And part of that has to do with character limits. A lot of the times, you know, within dialogue boxes, you get a certain number of characters that you're allowed to, that can fit in there for somebody to read. And so if it's only, say, like 160 characters, you have to make sure that every sentence that you write comes within that 160 characters. And you have to make sure that whatever jokes you're building towards can use like successive clicks of the dialogue box in order to build the tension, so that when the actual joke hits, it's funny, instead of as Ed was saying, having it all in the same dialogue box and kind of missing that sense of like building tension. So yeah, those are the things I would recommend.
I'm learning so much. Like this just my, if I wasn't sharing, I'd have a pen and paper just like, oh my gosh, like so many notes, but I'll have to go back and watch this later and cringe at myself. But I think that these are all such great points, like just that really, I think, gives so much insight to how the process works. And I think there's been a couple of questions about the sentiment that shows up in other writing disciplines of show, don't tell, that thing that we hear over and over again of show, don't tell, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. How relevant or not do you think that is to writing game dialogue? Or what, if you had a mantra to apply to games and sort of, you know, dialogue based stuff, would it be show, don't tell as well, or would it be something else?
One thing that I sometimes say when when I used to do consulting work and kind of jumping in and examining people's games that they're making, is that I would say, well, yeah, show don't tell is a great rule, but actually games, I alter it for games. I say play, don't show, don't tell, or rather not don't anything, but playing something and understanding it is better than seeing it and understanding it, and that's better than being told it. So like you have an additional layer when it comes to games, because if you can get across this information to a player in a way where they don't have to, you know, it comes through the mechanics, or it comes through the environment, or that stuff, you know, it comes through the act of them playing the game, then that's the best possible thing. If you need to take control of the camera to show them something, okay, yeah, definitely there are times where you need to do that, but you need to know to do it sparingly. And then if all else fails, yes, I guess you can literally have someone say, you need to do this. And, you know, quite often with games, one of the things is that you're getting across as objectives, and you have to be very clear with the player. Like you may want to be very characterful about it, but actually what the player wants is the player needs to know what to do. Like that's number one. That has to be the primary thing. So sometimes you do have to have somebody shout, you know, get to the chopper, or whatever. Hopefully not that corny, but like, so, you know, there's a place for all of it. But yeah, my thing is always like, whenever I see a breakdown of a story, I'm like, is there a way we can get the player to understand this without taking control from them? And if not, okay, but like that's the main thing. And then like, okay, can we do it by showing them something? And then if not, okay, we need to tell. That's kind of how I tend to approach things.
Yeah, I would very much agree with that. I guess personally, I lean more towards, is this piece of information really crucial for the player to know? Because if it is, just tell the player. Just the potential costs of having the player not understand where they need to go. This is one of those things that it depends on whether your audience is already hardcore gamers like Dark Souls, and mostly only other hardcore gamers are going to be playing it, or a more casual game. Because I've seen with trying to introduce my friends to games, a lot of times the signals that a gamer would pick up on for where to go next are not signals that a casual person who's trying to get into games are going to pick up on. So for me, when it comes to kind of really important base level things of like where you need to go next, how you play the game, you've unlocked something new, all of that needs to be specifically told to the player, just to make sure that we cover the widest base possible. And then from there, I agree with everything else I'd said.
I definitely agree with everything that has been said. Although if you want to really use the show don't tell concept, just make sure that, let's say if it's something that is interactive enough, maybe give the players like a timer. Maybe if you want to say in an information, a tutorial that is not that a subtle way to tell the how to play the game or how to tell the stories. If the players doesn't do anything for a few seconds, just tell them. But if not, just let it be told subtly, if it's possible.
That's all entirely fair. So let's as we're kind of like coming towards the final like 10 minutes of the session, I'm going to ask more generally, is there a particular character in games that you've played that has an incredibly unique voice that you forever are saying, my gosh, I wish I'd written that character with that voice. I'm forever chasing a character with as distinctive voice as that particular character? Or is there a particular narrative game that that for people who are wanting to get into sort of interactive dialogue through games that you might recommend that they check out?
I think the character I'd pick is Kaine from Nier Replicant. I think she just has an incredibly unique way of speaking, and don't think there is any other character in that game that could say a line of dialogue that she has and get away with it. Like, it only works because of her and the way that they beautifully set up her character. So I think that would probably be my choice.
Rather than a specific character, I'm just going to recommend a whole game because it's just kind of a beautiful masterpiece of narrative design and character design and building that all into all aspects of the game. And that game is Hades, which is a very gameplay heavy game, but also has a really broad and very interesting and very complexly designed narrative where it builds out over time based on your actions. But Hades is also a roguelike. So the way that they've built the game is very fascinating and great, and you should definitely check it out if you haven't already.
For me, I will recommend the one game that basically changed my life, which is Final Fantasy IX. It's a game that it has a world that I really want to live in. It's not a beautiful world, but it feels real. It has hidden history that doesn't really have anything to do with the game, but the characters feel real. The world feels amazing. It's just a place I want to go home to. And that's the game. And one other game is an adventure game called Virtue's Last Reward. It's part of the Zero Escape series. I won't say much about this game, but it's a game that tells a story that can only be told through video games.
I love all these answers. I was going to say my kind of the character voice that always comes to my mind so strongly is Fenris from Dragon Age 2. I think he has such a distinct way of speaking that even if it's sort of written, it's so clear that it's that character from the ways that he expresses himself, I'm just like, oh, I love this character so much. I'm not just because I think he's really hot, just like, but he is a really excellently written character. And I sort of, I suppose, a flip side question to that, how do you approach writing that faceless, silent protagonist as part of your sort of dialogue? How do you work that into your narrative design?
A faceless protagonist? One way I would do or I did was do not write too many things. Don't let the character say too many things. Um, let let the characters say things through the player's action, I guess. That's one of the safest way to do it, because once you put too many dialogues for the faceless character, it's not the players anymore, it's you, which is a pretty dangerous unless you're a really, really, really godly writer.
Yeah, I actually, with games that I write where I have the control to be able to decide how I write them, I prefer to give my faceless protagonists a personality. So rather than having them be a self-insert for the player, it's more of a chance for the player to try and empathize with a different way of thinking and being. And I've found that people are actually very, very receptive to that and tend to bond really, really intensely to playable characters that they get to make their choices, but also know what matters to those characters. So it's not entirely faceless, but I guess I'm saying that I prefer not to write faceless protagonists.
Yeah, I'm 100% with Cara. I would pretty much try and turn any situation where to make my protagonist have a character, again, because I'm very interested in the idea of embodying a character that isn't you and empathizing with what they do and how they are, and also how the actions that you do in the game, like how they mirror that personality. I mean, I would say I've never done it, so I don't know, but I think probably one of the easiest things to do would be to allow the player to have a choice in dialogue situations and have those choices embody different personality types. Like, so either the player has the choice to react to what somebody said angrily or sarcastically or cooperatively or whatever. I think that's the traditional way of doing it. That's probably the way I would look to do it if I had to write that kind of character. But yeah, I haven't had to do it yet, and I kind of hope I don't have to.
So the answer is just don't.
I'd like to add one more practical example, I guess. One thing that we did with Coffee Talk was making sure that the player's character is never mentioned by gender. So it's a totally gender neutral character. I mean, like, if it's possible for you to do that, I guess it would mean so much for the players. Even it would be better if you don't even have to make them choose between the genders, because it has more impact. But thankfully, I was born and raised with a language that is pretty much gender neutral. And I realized writing in English is super duper hard. But if you can pull it off, the players will appreciate it so much.
And as a quick last thing, I would say the Persona series is actually a really good series to look at a kind of faceless but not faceless protagonist. There's certain personality traits that you can give to a character that, while being defined personality traits that you can write off of, are not personality traits that people see as interfering with their projection. Like, you can make them responsible and like stoic, and those will generally work out.
Fabulous. I'm going to start to wrap us up, sadly, and leave us with one final question, hopefully a lighter one. What are your favorite types of characters to write? What really makes you just go, yes, I'm getting to write this?
So my favorite to write is somebody that acted like me. And one of my favorite character from Coffee Talk is an alien called Neil. simply because they don't speak English well, and I don't speak English that well, which makes writing the characters feel so much easier. So I just kind of like, I actually told the editor, if I made any grammatical errors with this character, leave it, let it be. And it was so satisfying to let everything I wrote to be, even the wrong sentences, to be present in the game. So yeah, naive character that doesn't speak English is my favorite type of character.
I like writing confrontational characters to really get the plot going, get the conflict going.
Yeah, quite similar. I like confrontational or kind of like bitchy, quick-witted people, because I get to kind of I get to look at a situation and think about what would be the funniest thing to say in that situation, which I don't get to do in real life because I'm not quick-witted enough. But when I'm writing that, I get to take my time and I get to live vicariously through that character and be the kind of the quick-witted cad that I really wish I was. So those are probably my favorite people. Yeah.
Well, that's so fabulous. Well, I'm going to be passing back to Andy shortly. Thank you so much to our fabulous panelists of Tara, Ed, Mohammed. You've been absolutely wonderful. We've learned so much. I've certainly learned so much. Thank you again to all of our lovely audience members, and for anyone still watching this on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope to see you at some of our other sessions soon.
Thank you so much, Leon. And that's the end of our panel tonight. I will share the contact details shortly. I hope you've all enjoyed it as much as I have. I know it's certainly been brilliant to be reminded that there's much more to writing games dialogue than writing Get to the Chopper, because I know how much of my career has been spent doing exactly that. So it's always good to go out and explore all of those elements. I've learned a huge amount from everybody today about their approaches to things and the different ways of going about this. As several of you have done actually during the event, you can still go ahead and book for the other events that we've got this week. We have 2 more remaining, one more on procedural generation and how that impacts narrative and how the 2 can be combined. We've had a nice segue into that with Hades being trailed quite a lot, so thanks, Cara. We've also got one on implementing dialogue. So when you think about theatre, you hand over your script to an actor. When you're thinking about screenwriting, you're thinking about the director, the actor. But a lot of the work in games is done by the people that are implementing the dialogue, which is often forgotten about. So please do come along and explore that aspect and understand what happens to your words once they have gone from the page and beyond, and before they go out to players. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Writers Guild for hosting this event. Please do think about joining us. There's some information there. Please do screenshot that. You can also find the video games guidelines there with advice and information for you for running through. There's some contact details for our wonderful panelists. So please do. We can't hear you in reality, but we will hear you through the psychic bonds in the universe. Please do cheer, fanfare, and scream. For anyone who's running an animal spotting sweepstake during the panels this week, you will have noticed there's a cat to add on there, and we are giving half points for the rabbit mug as we go through the week. So please do add those on if you're running those sweepstakes. I think I've covered all of the information. I'm going to look at Kate in case there's anything else that I need to add. Great stuff. So I will just turn back again to say thank you so much to our panelists for all of the information. I've learned a huge amount and definitely need to go back and watch this when it's on video. Thank you for coming along, and I hope you join us for some more of the events. Have a good evening.